Welcome to World Talks. I'm your host, Maciej Wilowski. It was founded more than 3 decades ago with the aim of helping the countries of the former Eastern Bloc in transitioning their economies. But today, despite the region's economic transformation, the EBRD, or the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, still has a presence in Central and Eastern Europe. Joining me today to discuss the nature of this work is Andreea Moraru, the EBRD's Regional Director for Poland and the Baltic States. Andreea, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
So your position at the EBRD is as the Regional Director for Poland and the Baltic States. Can you tell us a little bit about the type of work that the EBRD does here and the investments that are involved?
Sure. So EBRD has been the long-term partner of the Polish private sector for the last 35 years. We've been continue supporting the development of the Polish economy as it evolves to a more developed stage. For us, Poland now is not a convergence story anymore. It's a competitive story, and its future growth depends on the ability to innovate, energy security, and the ability to, for the Polish company to scale and expand internationally. And actually, here is where our role is. So over the last years, our investments accelerated actually in Poland, especially since the Russian invasion in Ukraine. Last year alone, we invested 1.35 billion across different sectors of the economy between debt and equity instruments. And this year, so far, we invested 300 million. And looking at the pipeline, we're comfortable that we are going to invest more or less the same levels as last year. We invest across different sectors of the Polish economy, and our outcomes are very tangible in terms of job creation, diversification of the energy sources, and also supporting Polish economies to scale and expand abroad. Our role is counter-cyclical and demand-driven, and I'm going to explain what is it. So when there are periods of uncertainty and difficult economic situations, and the private investors pause or step back, our role is to step in and fill the gap where the private sector is not able to fill. In the period of growth, like we are experiencing at the moment, our role is to complement the private sector, meaning working alongside the commercial banks, but going a step further, either providing longer-term capital, pension capital, and also provide more innovative structures that are not available on the market.
So you had mentioned earlier that Poland, as well as other economies in the region, are no longer economies in transition. And indeed, we've seen a massive economic transformation, not just in Poland, but other countries in the past 30 years. In that case, why does the EBRD, as a development bank, continue to invest here when it has other projects in areas like the Global South and in economies that are in dire need of economic reform and transformation?
Sure. So strong growth doesn't necessarily mean that there are no developmental gaps. And our role is to evolve as the economy evolves. So we are supporting now Poland to become a more competitive, resilient economy. And we still see developmental gaps in some areas. So one of it is the energy transition. Mm-hmm. So Poland has a huge gap in terms of still dependence on coal as a fossil fuel. And this has implication over the competitiveness and many part of the economy. Second is on the productivity and competitiveness. Polish companies still to reach the level of the Western Europe in terms of productivity and competitiveness. Then it's about the private investment, which although it's scaled up in the last period, it's still relatively low. And this is very important. And fourth is the deepening the capital markets, that they're still at the beginning of development. So our role is to support exactly to step in and fill this gap. Energy transition is a core priority for us here as part of the country's strategy, and we've been doing a lot in this space, but also supporting companies become more competitive and become regional players in Europe.
So focusing on the energy transition, like you had mentioned, Poland is, of course, still one of Europe's most coal-dependent countries, as it has been historically. But at the same time, we also see big projects in offshore wind, nuclear power. But again, given that dependence on coal, what do you think can be done from, for example, a policy standpoint to accelerate that transition?
As you said, the financing needs are still huge in the country. And in order to support this transition, financing from the banking sector is not sufficient. So what is required is to attract private capital in equity to support scale up these platforms. And in order to do that, we need a certainty of regulatory environment, and also a regulatory environment that creates condition to diversify this source of energy, because energy transition goes beyond renewable. It's thinking of the energy sector of the future, if you want, that combines a mix between renewable, new sources of energy like biomethane, biofuel, but these are new products that require certain regulatory environment. On the other hand, reducing coal, which is in line with this ambition, it also requires for this transition of these regions to be just, for the people that they work in that region to be offered programs for upskilling, so they have other opportunities in the job market. For us in EBRD, we are looking broadly holistic at the sector across asset classes. We provide beyond financing, like financing lending. We provide a lot of equity to equity platforms. We invest alongside equity funds, because especially in the periods where there is liquidity in the banking sector, and we're in that period, it's very important to provide the equity necessary to be able to leverage on the debt financing available from the market.
Now, looking at the Polish private sector and individual businesses, what do you think can be further done from a regulatory or perhaps legislative standpoint to further ease the cost of doing business in Poland, perhaps streamline regulation, and make it easier for investors to expand their businesses in Poland?
It's very important for the Polish company to be able to attract capital, and this is not sufficient. The local market, unfortunately, cannot offer a lot of capital because the institutional basis here is very low. So what we see from the regulatory requirements that needs to be changed is, for example, for the pension fund to be able to invest in private equity. The private equity is an excellent tool to support these companies develop, because they bring not only money, not only equity, but they bring also expertise. They work with the owners, they professionalize the business, and also they help them to expand abroad. So deepening the availability of the capital alongside with legislation that facilitated crowding this capital is very important for firms, especially for smaller companies, to have access not only to capital but expertise through the investors that they are able to attract.
So shifting the topic a little bit and maybe staying a little bit on the topic of energy, obviously over the past 2 months, the biggest development globally, both geopolitically and economically as well, has been the war in the Middle East and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Now we see that all around the world, regions are being impacted, energy prices are soaring. How has this crisis affected Poland and Central and Eastern Europe more broadly, and are we faring perhaps better than other parts of the world?
So at the bank, we are monitoring the situation very carefully. We looked into our portfolio companies to see what is the impact on the conflict that you mentioned. The good news is that so far, we don't see such a big impact. We don't see companies struggling financially impacted from the crisis. However, we have to acknowledge that this is not a local event. So the spillover, this is an event that is going to affect Europe through different transmission mechanisms, energy prices, food prices, commodity supply chain. So definitely there will be an impact. The question is the duration of this conflict. So depending on how long it takes, then the consequences will be worse or not. Our Polish clients are very resilient. So we looked into the portfolio, so we don't see so far any impact. But what this crisis reinforces is the need to diversify, especially on the energy sector. And this brings me to the previous question, that how important it is for Poland to diversify, don't depend on a single source of energy.
Andreea, well, thank you so much for your insights. I'd love to chat a little bit further, but unfortunately we have limited time, but thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
This was Maciej Wilowski, and thank you for listening to World Talks. Please stay tuned for more.